Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here speaking to you all, and it's lovely to see lots of familiar faces from the clinic and parents and people I've seen in clinic in the room, so I'm very pleased to be speaking to you all today. So as Jim mentioned, I work in the low vision clinics at Moorfields, and I also do research looking at different ways we can help people with sight loss. I generally work in children's clinics. I also work in clinics with young adults and spend some of my time with older adults as well. Before we start, I want to say I've got no commercial relationship to anything I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to give lots of different names of products and things to you, but the slides you're going to get later on from Andy, so don't worry about writing everything down. You'll get all of these details later on from Andy after the day. And it's not going to be absolutely comprehensive. There's so many things available. I'm, by definition, not going to mention every app you can get or every piece of technology you can get, but it's more an overview of the sort of things which are available and are becoming available in the future. So how do we help people to see with Stargardt disease? You've probably heard this mantra before of big, bright and bold. So that means big, not so big that you have to move your head around to see things, but big enough that your non-seeing bit of vision doesn't overlap too much of the scene. So you make it bigger so that the bit it doesn't see becomes smaller as a proportion of what you're seeing. We make things bright. Again, that doesn't mean so bright it's glaring and dazzling, but making it high contrast so that it's white on black, like this slide here, or perhaps black on yellow or yellow on black. Different people like different combinations of colour. What we want to steer away from are faint colours like yellow on green or yellow on white and things like that. And we make things bold, and that generally means thick lines, making things defined edges and sharp sort of boundaries between light and dark. So, for example, with somebody who's at school, we might say if you write in a thick black pen rather than a pencil, as many of you will know, that makes things so much more visible when you read back because it's a thicker, bolder line. So how do we make things big, bright and bold? When I started in the clinic about 18 years ago, that meant largely using large print and getting access to things in a bigger format. You may remember a few years ago when the last Harry Potter book came out, there was a big outcry because the large print version wasn't available on the same day as the conventional size print version because they were so protective of the copyright over the Harry Potter book. And the RNIB and others had a big campaign about this, saying this isn't fair. If you need large print, you can't see this at the same time as all of your friends. And of course, that's really changed now because everything's available electronically. Everyone can download their books to their Kindle or their iPad or whatever and make things much larger and much easier to see to a format that suits them. So that's what I'm going to speak about today, is how things have changed. So to start off with, I know Andrew said this is boring, and to a certain extent it is, but we still work with optical solutions as well. So even though there's these exciting things, it's still important that people with Stargardt disease have the best glasses. Just because you have Stargardt disease doesn't mean you can't be short-sighted or have astigmatism or need reading glasses as you get older. And all of these things, sometimes people overlook because they think, well, the problem's at the back of the eye. I don't need to make sure I get my eyes tested so often. But it's important we give people the right spectacles. We often use very strong reading glasses that focus very close, so people have to hold the page close but can see in a magnified way by doing that. And we still use conventional magnifying glasses, hand magnifiers, stand magnifiers, binoculars and telescopes. So for example, here's a picture of a child, a young person, looking at a toy car, and they're using a combination of high-powered spectacles and this stand magnifier, which enlarges the view, puts the image of the car closer to their eye to make it easier and bigger for them to see. So there's still a role for these sorts of magnifiers. We still dispense a lot of these in the hospital. And to discuss these and all of the other things, I think it's important you're seen in a low vision clinic. Those of you seen at Moorfields, I hope you've already been referred into the low vision clinic to talk about these things. In other parts of the country, some low vision clinics run in hospitals, some are run by charities like the RNIB. If any of you are from Wales, then they're generally run in high street optometrist practices. But everyone has a pathway to get access to a low vision clinic to look at these sorts of devices. So that's sort of the past, if you like, but although we still use these things. This is becoming a little bit more modern, so these have been available for about 25 years or so. These electronic magnifiers, or CCTV magnifiers. As many of you will have seen, these are systems where you put things onto a table or onto underneath a device, and they get enlarged onto the screen. And we can get very, very large amounts of magnification from these. So on the right-hand side here, this is a desktop CCTV magnifier. The newspaper is underneath it, and that's enlarged about 40 times bigger on the screen in front of you. And we can do lots of clever things with this, like change a contrast, change a colour, so you get your grey on grey newsprint and make it white on black or black on white. These are still very expensive. I'll talk a little bit about funding at the end. But for people in the workplace or people doing research on old documents, for example, these types of things are really helpful. The picture on the left here is a more simple device. This is called a monomouse. This is a camera in a computer mouse type of system which gets plugged into a laptop or into a television and does the same sort of thing, but is cheaper for home use. And as many of you will have seen recently, we've got lots more of these handheld electronic magnifiers available. These are sort of a few £100s, whereas the other things are often a few £1,000s. And there's lots and lots of different products which do this, which magnify, which you can use to look at a menu in a shop or a shop price or something like that. So we have these sort of electronic magnifiers. But the real difference that's happened recently, in the last few years, of course, are the amount of tablet computers, iPads, smartphones, all these things which most of us are carrying around with us all the time. And these, of course, have very bright, very high-quality screens. They have good cameras, and they have very advanced processors and lots of computing power, which means we can do lots of clever things with helping things become easier to see with these. So first of all, to talk about the sort of mainstream things that are on everybody's phone, which people tend to use. The really big difference in the last few years in the clinic is I see people are using their phone as a magnifier. So if you're at a railway station, you want to know what platform the train's on, we used to give people telescopes for that, so they can look and try and find the platform. But nowadays what people do, particularly younger people, they take a photograph of their phone, nobody looks twice at them using their phone to take a photo, and they zoom in on the picture to look at what platform to get the train to Brighton from, for example. Particularly the younger people we see in clinic, they don't want to carry a magnifying glass around, quite understandably. They don't want to sit there with their friends in a restaurant using a magnifying glass with a light to read, but they're quite happy using their phone to take a photo and zoom in to read the menu. And the phone's always there, it's always charged, it's always in their pocket. Quite a lot of people like using text-to-speech, so that is rather than enlarging things and reading it, they like things to be read to them. Previously, this meant having very expensive, sort of quite clunky pieces of software on your computer, but now the built-in text-to-speech software, like VoiceOver on an Apple device, or TalkBack on Android, or Narrator on Windows, is quite a lot better than it was, and it's much quicker. It's a more natural-sounding voice, and people often use that to get information. They like things to be read to them. The sort of personal assistants you get, like Siri and OK Google, which you get on your smartphones, a lot of people I meet in clinic use those a lot for navigation, for advice. I saw somebody the other day who's got one of these Amazon smart devices that's always listening to you, slightly sinister, eavesdropping from Amazon. But he uses this for everything. He'll sit there and he'll say, play some Vivaldi, and the music will come on, turn my lights down, and the music will go dim, and turn my thermostat up, and all these aspects of his home he's happy to control with this device he speaks to. GPS and navigation devices, a lot of people I meet use these a lot, so as you know, you can get step-by-step directions outside. On most smartphones it's built in, so you have an earpiece in, and it will say to you, turn left at the end of the road, turn right at the end of the next road, and give you directions to get to places. So again, rather than looking at the A to Z and using a magnifying glass, you have this in your pocket anyway. Citymapper, for those of us in London, and lots of other navigation apps work really well and tie into local public transport things. So Citymapper, for example, will tell you what the next bus will be at the bus stop you're standing at with a large degree of accuracy. So again, rather than telescopes, rather than looking and trying to work out what the bus number is, this will tell you the next bus at this stop will be a 205, the one after that will be a 43, and you know what bus you're expecting before having to look for it. And all these things are free. And then for reading, as I mentioned before, for reading for pleasure, people use Kindles, they use the iBooks app, all sorts of things like that. One thing which you might not be aware of is BorrowBox, which is a fairly new system which links into your local library. So not every area has this yet, but it's a way where you can borrow ebooks from your library and audiobooks from your library, get them on your iPad or on your tablet computer, and then manipulate the size and the font and the contrast as you wish without having to pay for books. So I think most libraries have some system for doing this now, so you can borrow books from your local library electronically. So those are sort of some of the common things that people are doing with their mobile phones or their tablets. Education, obviously, again, something where technology is so widely used in the classroom for everybody in school now. One of the really big uses of this now is that, as you know, most classrooms have smart boards, so the teachers put things on an electronic screen, and it's quite straightforward to get that image relayed onto an iPad or onto a tablet or onto a laptop. So in the classroom, usually people who need extra help seeing the board, rather than going close, are now getting a relay on their own desk or that they can carry around, so they can see in real time exactly what the teacher's doing and what's being shown on the board. And again, this is a massive change in the sort of 20 years or so I've been involved in this area. In secondary school, teachers will normally pre-prepare the slides. They can get emailed to people before the lessons, so they can either, again, have them on an electronic device or get them printed out in whatever format they like. And the other big thing I'd like to mention about education is the RNIB Bookshare system. This used to be called Load to Learn. This is a system where most textbooks available in school are made available electronically to people with vision impairment. So you get them in a format that you can then change. You can change the font size, you can print them out, you can make them as big or as bold as you like. And that's a system which you need to register with through the school or the education authority, but it's a way of getting access to textbooks. So again, all these things are new and very useful, I think. I'd like to now talk about some different apps and some of these sort of device things which have been developed for people specifically with difficulties with their eyesight. A lot of the time these are developed by developers not specifically for one condition, but as a general, if you can't see well, how can we help you? One thing people often talk about is having difficulty matching colours, so matching their clothes when they get dressed or making sure their socks are the same colour if you care about that sort of thing, which I don't. And there's software things that can help with that. So Colour ID and ViaDaily are both apps you can get now. They're both free, which do this fairly well. So they use the camera on your phone, you hold them up against something that will tell you what colour it is, to a reasonable degree of accuracy. These things are all getting better all the time. It depends on the quality of the camera on the phone as much as anything else. There's loads of magnifier apps you can get. If you search for magnifier apps, there's thousands and thousands in all the app stores. Some are very good, some are less good. One of the problems with these often is as you try and scan around, it makes it very blurred sometimes, unless they have clever image processing things. But there's lots of magnifier apps you can get for your phone. Navigation I mentioned before. Ariadne is a specific navigation app you can get for people with visual impairment. Unlike normal GPS, it works inside in some buildings as well. So in a shopping centre, it can tell you how to get to a certain shop, for example, whereas conventional GPS doesn't work so well indoors. There's lots of social apps. Blind Square is one, for example. This is a system where people who have vision impairment can share information about different places. So it might be as you go to a restaurant, it might say, the toilets are downstairs, it's quite dark, the gents is on the left, the ladies is on the right. Or it might say, I went to this restaurant, they were really rude to me and wouldn't give me a large print menu. It's a way of sharing information, and that's something which is taking off a bit as well. A good way to hear about all these things is the RNIB have an app of the month available. Again, there's so many of these, to find out the right one can be sometimes quite tricky. The next big thing I'd like to talk about are these new image recognition apps. There's lots of these. VisWiz is one, Be My Eyes is one, TapTapSee is one. And these work in different ways. You take photographs or record videos, and it will read text to you that's on the screen, or it will tell you what things are. And these work in different ways. Some of them use computer technology to do this and image recognition. Some use volunteers who sign up to volunteer for this and answer questions remotely for you. And some use a combination of the two. So what does this mean, for example? This one is an example. I think this one is from TapTapSee. So you take a photograph and it tells you at the bottom, it says this picture is a black plastic stapler. So you take a photograph, it recognises the scheme, it tells you what it is. So I experimented with this for lots of different things that people actually want to be able to do. This one I think is from VisWiz. And this is an example of some of the things I've asked it. So this is a train ticket, what time does this train depart? And it will tell you what time it is by reading it off the train ticket. This is one that uses people who answer the question for you. Which bell do I press to get into this building for flat number 6? What number is on this door? What's the dose on this medication label? When does this library book due back? These are the sorts of questions it can answer. Just to point out, actually, on the medicine label, one actually made a mistake, and it said to take 3 kilograms once daily with food, which just shows you to treat these things with caution, particularly if you're going to take 3 kilograms of any tablet. But again, the technology is exciting. It's all there. It's all getting developed. Sometimes it's remarkably good. This is from ViaDaily, which does this. This managed to get a blurred picture of my cat and somehow say it's a black, short-haired cat. Quite how it knew that, I don't know. But it doesn't always work as you'd want. So this is a picture of a door. I think normally the most important thing if you're looking for a door is what number it says. And it identifies this picture and says it's a brown wooden door, which is nice to know, but not as useful as knowing it's number 6, which would be what you'd actually want. So again, these things are not perfect yet. A lot of the time it's easier to ask somebody next to you, but it's another mechanism of helping you to get around independently. The next sort of exciting thing, the things which are becoming available at the moment, are these wearable technology devices. So this picture is of Orcam, which you may have heard of. This is a camera which sits on the side of your own glasses. It identifies text and it reads text to you through a bone conduction earpiece which goes in front of your ear on your temple. This works really pretty well. So if you're reading printed text, it will read it to you. No one else can hear it because of the type of earpiece it is, and it will read print to you quite quickly. And it's available in half a dozen languages at the moment. It also works pretty well for signs. So the way it works, you point to something, it looks at where your finger is, and it will identify the text that's near there. So you can point to a sign, it will read to you what the sign says. It doesn't work so well with handwriting. It doesn't work so well in very dim light. It claims to be able to recognise faces as well, and it does that to an extent, although not quite as well as people want yet. I think in time, this will be a system which will be really, really useful in that you could walk down the street and it will say you're walking past Andrew Webster, and you can decide whether to cross the road or not before I speak to him. So this is available now. This is something which I've met quite a few people who are using, and it's very exciting for particularly the type of people we see in clinic who maybe they've collected paperback books all their life, they get to retirement and they've got this whole library of books and they're struggling to read them. That type of person, I think, finds this system very helpful. Give Vision Sight Plus, which they're here today actually exhibiting. This is an augmented reality system which is available now, again to help with vision. So it's a bit of a cumbersome headset at the moment. It's one of these virtual reality headsets. It's got a smartphone in it which has got a very bright screen. And the idea is this is something you can use for various different things. You can use it to magnify the scene you're looking at. So you can use it at the theatre, for example, to see what's on the stage. You can connect your television into it. You can connect your PC monitor into it. You can connect video games into it. So as you may see, this is a BBC News story about it. The headline is "Partially Sighted Paralympian Gets to See Boyfriend Clearly with this device." It doesn't tell you what the boyfriend thought about this, whether that was a good or bad thing. And there's a really nice bit of footage available at the moment, again on the BBC, we're using this device, where a young boy with vision loss is able to play FIFA with his brother for the first time really well, and it's a very sort of emotional bit of footage. Because he's got this headset on, he can see the computer screen the same as his brother can on the TV. So this is really exciting technology. We're working with the company to try and plan some proper research trials to see exactly what this is helpful for and how it's used. The next stage for this, of course, is that the headset will be lighter, it'll be more normally accessible. I think the end point is to have something that looks like a normal pair of glasses, but can give you this sort of image enhancement at the same time. eSight, I've not got a picture of that, that's another system. It's a head-mounted system, the same type of system as this. It's something that's built specifically rather than being using existing technology. It's quite a bit more expensive, but it does the same type of thing, and that's available as well. And there's others too. BrainPort I mentioned just because it's quite an interesting, different approach to things. This is a system which has a camera on glasses again, but it translates the scene you're looking at not into speech, but into an array of electrodes that you have in your mouth. So the idea is it's really for people with no sight at all, but you'd look at, for example, a door frame, which is this sort of shape, 3 sides of a square, and then you'll feel on the top of your mouth that it sort of fizzes, and you'll feel that shape on this electrode thing that goes in your mouth. So it's called sensory substitution. It's taking sight, it's putting it into your mouth, so that you get the sense through that instead. I had to go with this a few years ago in the States, and I just dribbled, and apparently that's quite normal to start off with. But the point is there's lots of different approaches which are being researched and being looked at to try and substitute or replace some elements of sight with different senses. And the last one I put there is Google Glass, which you may remember a few years ago we were told this would be the next big thing and everyone would be walking around with these little screens on their glasses. Google Glass didn't really take off, but I know that Google and other companies are still working on these types of systems, these sort of wearable technology devices. And I think in the future we are going to see people, for good or for bad, using these types of things much more. And it may be that, well, it will be that as these are developed, there'll be simultaneously applications for helping vision at the same time. So I think all these mainstream technology things which will come in the next few years will be useful for all of us as well. So that's some of the wearable things. So I imagine some of you sitting here thinking that's great, fantastic, all these things, they sound expensive, and they are expensive. You know, we're talking about thousands of pounds for lots of these systems. Orcam is about, I think Orcam is £2,200. The Give Vision thing, I think, is £800. You know, these are significant amounts of money. So how do I pay for these things? Starting with the low-tech things, as you know, spectacles are means tested on the NHS. So if you have low income or you are a child, spectacles are covered by the NHS. Some of the high-power reading glasses we use are classified as magnifiers, and they're covered by the NHS. Optical magnifiers, like telescopes, like hand magnifiers and so on, are covered by the NHS as well on a permanent loan system, so those things are provided through health budgets. For young people in education in schools, you'll have heard probably the Education Healthcare Plan. This is something which has replaced the statement of special educational needs that used to exist. And this is a way that if somebody needs additional technology in the classroom or at school to see, then this will pay for that. This will provide payment for these systems. So people are gradually being moved from statements onto EHCPs, and this will fund that. Moving up in age a little bit, people at university, the disabled students allowance can be used for these types of things. That tends to be fairly generous and will pay for technology, will pay for extra support that people need as well. And for people in employment or looking for work, the Access to Work scheme is a government scheme which will pay for or impel your employer to pay for these types of technologies if they're useful for your work, for travel to and from work, and for your daily job to an extent. Failing that, after these sort of statutory schemes, there's lots of charity grants which are available, both from national charities, particularly often occupational specific charities, and also local organisations are often happy to pay for these. So the local Round Table and Rotary and Lions and people are often quite happy to make a grant for this type of technology, particularly for young people, because it's a sort of one-off grant, it's a relatively small amount of money for them, and they can fundraise for this device to help the person from the darts team still play darts in a pub, for example, which is one person I know. So that's what I want to talk about now. As I mentioned, I know everyone in this room will be using different things on their phones and different types of technology, and I've not mentioned everything at all. But I do encourage people to share this sort of these skills and the apps they're using, the things they like with each other. And that's how we learn in the clinic as well, as some people coming in saying, have you seen this? I use this, it's brilliant. And then we sort of try and share the information back with you. So thank you very much.